The pattern is maddening in its consistency and cruelty. When you express love, when you show up consistently, when you pursue connection, when you make your care and investment visible, the avoidant person responds by withdrawing, creating distance, becoming cold or critical, punishing you for the very love you're offering. But when you pull back, when you stop pursuing, when you redirect your attention elsewhere, when you demonstrate indifference or unavailability, suddenly the avoidant person comes alive. They pursue you, express interest, show affection, reward your distance with exactly the closeness you were seeking when you showed love. This inverted dynamic feels deliberately cruel, like emotional manipulation designed to keep you confused and off balance. But understanding why avoidance punishes love and rewards indifference reveals that this pattern is not conscious manipulation, but rather an automatic nervous system response rooted in their attachment wounds and the beliefs built around those wounds. The avoidant person's system has learned through painful early experiences that love is dangerous, that expressing care makes you vulnerable to rejection, that depending on someone gives them power to hurt you. These lessons create a defensive structure where love registers as threat requiring defensive response, while indifference registers as safety allowing approach. The avoidant person punishes you for loving them, not because they don't want love, but because your love activates every fear and wound they've organized their life around avoiding. They reward your indifference, not because they prefer being ignored, but because your indifference removes the threat that your love created, allowing them to feel safe enough to pursue connection on their terms. Understanding this dynamic doesn't make it less painful or more acceptable, but it does reveal why the pattern exists and why trying to love an avoidant person harder will never work. The more love you offer, the more threatened they feel. The more you pursue, the more they withdraw. The cycle is self-reinforcing and nearly impossible to break from within the relationship because the very thing you need to do, love them openly and consistently, is the very thing their system interprets as danger. Love registers as threat in their nervous system. The fundamental reason avoidance punishes you for loving them is that your love triggers their nervous system's threat response as powerfully as if you are actually attacking them. This is not metaphorical or exaggerated. When you express love, care, need for them, desire for closeness, the avoidant person's body responds with physiological stress response, increased heart rate, shallow breathing, tension, activation of fight or flight. Their nervous system genuinely perceives your love as danger, and they respond to that danger through defensive behaviors that create the distance they need to feel safe again. Understanding this physiological reality is essential because it reveals that the avoidant person's punishment of your love is not conscious choice or deliberate cruelty, but rather automatic defensive response they often cannot control or even fully recognize. The avoidant person's nervous system learned to interpret love as threat through early experiences, where expressing need or depending on caregivers led to rejection, dismissal, or harm. Perhaps they cried as infants and were left to cry, learning that expressing need doesn't bring comfort. Perhaps they showed excitement or affection and were met with irritation or dismissal. Perhaps they depended on caregivers who were inconsistent or who made their love conditional on the child's good behavior. Perhaps they witnessed love being weaponized in their family, used to manipulate or control. Whatever the specific experiences, the common thread is that love, vulnerability, and dependence became associated with pain, rejection, or danger rather than with safety and comfort. These early associations created neural pathways that remain active into adulthood. When you express love to the avoidant person, you're activating those pathways, triggering memories and sensations connected to past experiences where love led to pain. The avoidant person is not consciously thinking about those past experiences, but their body remembers. Their nervous system responds to your love as if it carries the same danger that early experiences of love or need carried. This is why the avoidant person's response to your love seems so disproportionate and irrational. You're offering care and connection, which should feel good, but their system is responding as if you're offering threat and harm. The specific ways your love triggers the avoidant person's threat response reveal what they learned to fear about intimacy. When you express that you miss them or want to see them more, they feel pressured and trapped because they learned that others' needs for them were burden or obligation. When you express vulnerability or need for support, they feel overwhelmed because they learned that being needed means being consumed or controlled. When you express desire for commitment or future together, they feel suffocated because they learned that commitment means loss of autonomy. Each expression of love activates different aspect of their core wound around intimacy and dependence. The avoidant person's punishment of your love takes predictable forms that are all designed to create the distance their nervous system is demanding. They become cold or distant, withdrawing emotional presence even if they remain physically present. They criticize you or focus on your flaws, creating intellectual distance by devaluing what they're actually afraid of valuing too much. They pick fights or manufacture conflict, using anger and discord to create emotional distance. They physically withdraw, canceling plans, reducing contact, creating literal space between you. They might even end the relationship entirely if their threat response is strong enough and they see no other way to escape the danger your love represents. These punishing responses are not calculated to hurt you, though they absolutely do hurt you. They're desperate attempts to regulate overwhelming anxiety that your love triggered. The avoidant person is essentially drowning in discomfort, and they're thrashing toward any behavior that might relieve that discomfort. The behaviors that relieve their discomfort, creating distance from your love, are the same behaviors that punish you for offering that love. This is the tragic core of the dynamic. What they need to feel safe is exactly what hurts you most, and what you need to feel secure is exactly what threatens them most. The avoidant person's internal experience during this process is usually not awareness that they're punishing you for loving them. Instead, they experience it as reasonable response to feeling pressured or overwhelmed. They tell themselves you're being too needy, too demanding, too intense. They focus on your imperfections or ways you're incompatible. They convince themselves they need space for healthy reasons rather than recognizing they're fleeing from intimacy. This self-narrative protects them from seeing their own patterns and from feeling guilt about how their defensive responses hurt you. It allows them to frame their punishment of your love as your problem rather than as their limitation. The intensity of the avoidant person's threat response to your love often correlates with how much they actually care about you. This seems counterintuitive, but makes sense when you understand the mechanism. If they don't care much about you, your love doesn't threaten them because they're not vulnerable. They can receive your love with relative comfort because it doesn't really matter to them. But when they care deeply about you, when you've become genuinely important to them, your love becomes exponentially more threatening because now they have something to lose. The more they care, the more vulnerable they are. And the more their system interprets your love as danger, because that love has the power to hurt them if it's withdrawn or if they allow themselves to depend on it and it proves unreliable. This means the avoidant person punishes your love most severely precisely when the relationship matters most to them. The person who seems most scared of your love is often the person who wants it most, but cannot tolerate the vulnerability that receiving it would require. This tragic irony is at the heart of why relationships with avoidant people are so painful. The punishment you receive for loving them is actually evidence that your love matters profoundly to them. But that evidence comes in form of rejection and withdrawal that feels like proof that you don't matter at all. Your indifference activates their attachment wounds. While love triggers the avoidant person's threat response and defensive withdrawal, indifference creates entirely different reaction by activating the attachment wounds underneath their defenses. When you stop pursuing, when you redirect your attention elsewhere, when you demonstrate that you don't need them or aren't particularly invested in them, you activate the avoidant person's core fear that they're unimportant, forgettable, not worthy of love or pursuit. This fear is deeply buried beneath their defense of independence and self-sufficiency. But it's the original wound that their avoidant patterns developed to protect. Your indifference threatens to confirm that wound. And the avoidant person responds by pursuing you to prove to themselves that they do matter, that they are wanted, that the wound isn't true. The avoidant person's core wound beneath all their defenses is the belief that they're not lovable or worthy of consistent care. They learned early that their needs were burdened, that their presence was tolerable only when they were self-sufficient and undemanding, that love was conditional on them not needing too much. These experiences create a deep sense that they're fundamentally not enough or too much, that their authentic self with all its needs and vulnerabilities is unacceptable. The avoidant person developed their defensive structure to protect themselves from ever having to feel that inadequacy and rejection again. By not needing anyone, by maintaining independence, by keeping people at distance, they protect themselves from the pain of being found insufficient and abandoned. But when you become indifferent, when you stop pursuing them, when you demonstrate through your behavior that they don't matter much to you, you threaten to confirm the very fear their defenses are protecting against. Your indifference suggests that maybe they were right to fear being unimportant, that they aren't worth pursuing, that people don't really want them when they're not performing or providing something. This activation of their core wound creates anxiety that is different from the anxiety your love created, but equally uncomfortable. The anxiety your love created was about vulnerability and potential loss. The anxiety your indifference creates is about worthlessness and irrelevance. The avoidant person responds to this anxiety by pursuing you, trying to restore their sense that they matter and are wanted. This pursuit looks like the engagement and interest you've been seeking all along, but it's not driven by genuine desire for intimacy. It's driven by need to regulate the anxiety your indifference created, to prove to themselves that they're still important to you, to restore the dynamic where they have power and control, rather than being the one who is ignored or dismissed. The pursuit is about managing their own wounded feelings rather than about genuine desire to connect with you. The specific behaviors the avoidant person displays when you become indifferent reveal their desperation to restore your attention and prove they matter. They initiate contact after periods of silence. They show interest in your life and ask questions they never asked when you were pursuing them. They make plans and follow through more consistently. They express vulnerability or share things about themselves they previously kept hidden. They might even express feelings or make commitments they were unwilling to make when you were available. All of these behaviors are attempts to draw you back in, to restore your investment in them, to confirm that they have value and importance to you. This pursuit is what you've been wanting all along, but it comes with critical limitation. It's only sustainable as long as you maintain some level of indifference or unavailability. The moment you respond to their pursuit by becoming fully available and loving again, by showing that you care deeply and want connection, you reactivate their threat response and they withdraw again. The reward they gave you for your indifference disappears as soon as you stop being indifferent. This creates impossible dynamic where the only way to keep the avoidant person engaged is to maintain distance and unavailability that prevents genuine intimacy. The avoidant person's pursuit of you when you're indifferent is also driven by competitive or possessive instincts that their attachment wounds activate. When you're pursuing them, they have you and know they could have you anytime they wanted, so you're taken for granted. But when you become unavailable, especially if that unavailability involves attention to other people or other areas of your life, the avoidant person suddenly perceives threat of loss. The possibility that you might not be available to them, that someone else might claim your attention, that they might lose option they've been taking for granted, activates anxiety that drives pursuit. This competitive pursuit is particularly intense if the avoidant person perceives that you're dating or interested in someone else. Your attention to another person triggers their fear of being replaced or found insufficient compared to someone else. They suddenly want to prove they're the better option, that they can win you, that they're more desirable than whoever else has your attention. This competition-driven pursuit can create very intense reconnection where the avoidant person seems fully engaged and invested. But again, this intensity typically diminishes once they've secured your attention and eliminated the perceived competition. The pursuit was about winning and proving their value rather than about genuine desire for sustained intimacy with you. The reward the avoidant person gives you for your indifference can feel validating and exciting. Finally, they're showing up. Finally, they're pursuing. Finally, they're demonstrating interest and investment. This feels like breakthrough, like proof that if you just maintain the right level of unavailability, the relationship can work. But this interpretation misunderstands what's happening. The avoidant person is not pursuing you because they've developed capacity for intimacy. They're pursuing you because your indifference triggered different set of anxieties and defenses that manifest as pursuit rather than withdrawal. Neither their withdrawal when you love them nor their pursuit when you ignore them represents authentic, sustainable relating. Both are defensive responses to different threats. The power dynamic they need to feel safe. The pattern where avoidance punishes love and rewards indifference reveals the specific power dynamic they need to feel safe in relationships. The avoidant person can only tolerate intimacy when they maintain position of power and control, when they're the less invested party, when they have ability to regulate distance according to their needs without considering your needs. This power imbalance is not conscious desire to dominate or control, but rather fundamental requirement for their nervous system to tolerate connection at all. When the power dynamic shifts toward balance or toward you having more power, the avoidant person's anxiety becomes intolerable and they withdraw. When you love the avoidant person openly, when you pursue them, when you express your need for them, you're giving them power in the relationship. They know you want them. They know you're invested. They know you care more than they're showing they care. This power should feel good and make them feel secure. But for the avoidant person, it has the opposite effect. Your obvious investment and their position of power means they have something to lose now. They're in position where you could withdraw your love and hurt them. They're vulnerable to rejection or abandonment. Even though they're the one who appears to have the power, this vulnerability is intolerable. So they withdraw to reduce it, punishing your love in order to decrease their own vulnerability. The punishment of your love serves to restore power balance in the direction the avoidant person needs. By withdrawing, by becoming cold or critical, by reducing their investment in response to your increased investment, they're creating distance that protects them from the vulnerability your love created. They're communicating, often unconsciously, that your love doesn't affect them that much, that they don't need you, that they're fine either way. This communication is an attempt to reduce their own vulnerability by appearing less invested than you are. The more you love them, the more they need to demonstrate they don't need your love to protect themselves from the pain they would feel if your love was withdrawn. When you become indifferent, when you stop pursuing, when you demonstrate you don't need them, you shift the power dynamic dramatically. Now they're in the less powerful position. They're the one who might be losing something while you appear fine either way. This shift activates their attachment wounds and their competitive instincts, driving them to pursue you, to restore power balance in their favor. But their pursuit is about regaining position of power, not about accepting position of mutual vulnerability that genuine partnership requires. They pursue until they've restored sense that you care more than they do, and then they withdraw again. The avoidant person needs to be pursued, not pursuer. They need to be wanted more than they demonstrate wanting. They need to maintain position where they could leave at any time and would be fine, where you would be the one hurt by the loss. This position feels safe to them because it minimizes their vulnerability. If they don't need you more than you need them, then losing you can't hurt them that badly. If they're always the one with less to lose, they can protect themselves from the devastation of loss that they fear above almost anything else. The entire dynamic of punishing love and rewarding indifference serves this need to maintain protective power and balance. This need for power imbalance is why relationships with avoidant people often feel like games, or like you're constantly trying to figure out the right amount of interest to show. Too much interest and they withdraw. Too little and they pursue. You're trying to find the exact balance that keeps them engaged, which usually means demonstrating just enough interest to keep them somewhat insecure about your investment, but not so much interest that you trigger their fear of vulnerability. This is exhausting and ultimately impossible to maintain because genuine relationship requires mutual vulnerability and relatively balanced investment. The power imbalance the avoidant person needs is incompatible with healthy partnership. The avoidant person's need to maintain power also shows in how they handle relationship milestones and progression. Any movement toward greater commitment, any discussion of future, any step that would increase interdependence and balance the power dynamic triggers their withdrawal. They resist meeting each other's families, moving in together, getting engaged. Any change that would make the relationship more real and would increase their vulnerability by making them more invested and more intertwined. These milestones all shift power toward more balanced dynamic, which is exactly what the avoidant person cannot tolerate. The power dynamic the avoidant person needs also explains why they often idealize exes or people from their past while devaluing current partners. The exes and past connections have power because they're unavailable, absent, existing only in memory, where they can be idealized without the threat of actual intimacy. The avoidant person can feel deeply for these unavailable people because those feelings don't require any actual vulnerability or risk. But the current partner, who is present and available and wanting real connection, threatens them with actual intimacy and actual vulnerability, so that partner gets devalued and punished. The contrast reveals that the avoidant person's feelings are more about their own need for control and safety than about the actual qualities of the people involved. Understanding this power dynamic reveals why traditional relationship advice doesn't work with avoidant people. You're told to be vulnerable, to express your feelings, to pursue what you want, to invest in the relationship. All of this advice, which works with secure or anxious partners, backfires with avoidant partners because it shifts power in directions that trigger their defenses. With avoidant people, the counterintuitive approach of maintaining some emotional distance, some independence, some withholding of full investment is what allows any connection to exist at all. But maintaining this distance prevents the genuine intimacy and mutual vulnerability that makes relationships meaningful, which is why relationships with avoidant people so often feel hollow even when they're technically continuing. Breaking the cycle without becoming avoidant yourself. Understanding why avoidance punishes love and rewards indifference creates terrible dilemma. If you want to keep the avoidant person engaged, you need to withhold your love and maintain distance. But doing this requires you to suppress your authentic feelings and become someone you're not. It requires you to play games, to strategically manage your level of investment, to protect yourself through the same kind of emotional withdrawal you've been hurt by. In essence, staying with an avoidant person and adapting to their needs requires you to develop avoidant behaviors yourself, sacrificing your own attachment security to accommodate their dysfunction. This transformation is subtle but devastating. You start out as secure or anxious person, capable of expressing love openly and wanting intimate connection. But months or years with an avoidant person teach you that expressing love leads to punishment while withholding leads to reward. You learn to suppress your feelings, to act more indifferent than you feel, to maintain distance even when you want closeness. You learn to play it cool, to not show how much you care, to protect yourself through the same defensive distance that's been hurting you. You become avoidant in your behavior, even if that's not your natural attachment style. And this transformation damages your capacity for healthy intimacy beyond this relationship. The cost of adapting to the avoidant person's needs is loss of your authentic self in the relationship. You cannot be genuine about your feelings. You cannot express your needs directly. You cannot pursue connection when you want it. You cannot build the kind of intimate partnership you actually want. Instead, you're managing a carefully calibrated dance where you show just enough interest to keep them somewhat engaged, but not so much that you trigger their withdrawal. This performance is exhausting and ultimately hollow because what you're maintaining isn't genuine relationship, but rather fragile arrangement based on your suppression of authentic needs and feelings. The other option, the one that protects your attachment security and authenticity, is to refuse to play the game. This means expressing your love and needs honestly, even knowing that doing so will likely trigger the avoidant person's withdrawal. It means refusing to withhold or strategically manage your investment. It means being genuine about wanting intimacy and commitment, even though the avoidant person experiences these as threats. This authentic approach will likely result in the avoidant person leaving or creating such significant distance that the relationship effectively ends, but it preserves your integrity and your capacity for healthy intimacy with someone who can actually receive it. Refusing to play the game requires accepting that you cannot change the avoidant person's patterns through your behavior. You cannot love them enough to make them feel safe. You cannot withhold enough to keep them engaged long term. You cannot find the perfect balance that allows genuine intimacy to develop. The problem is not your approach, but their inability to tolerate intimacy regardless of how it's offered. Accepting this reality means grieving the relationship you hope to have and recognizing that the avoidant person is not capable of providing the partnership you need. Breaking the cycle also requires examining what drew you to the avoidant person and why you've been willing to tolerate being punished for your love. Often people who end up in relationships with avoidance have their own wounds around worthiness and love. Perhaps you believe you have to earn love through perfect behavior. Perhaps you believe you're too much and need to suppress yourself to be acceptable. Perhaps you believe real love requires sacrifice of your needs. The avoidant person's dynamic confirms these wounds by suggesting that your authentic love is indeed too much and must be withheld to maintain connection. Healing means challenging these beliefs and recognizing that your love should be received with appreciation rather than punishment.